Hello, everyone. I fell into analytics by accident about 6.5 years ago. Now you know me as a program writer for a respectable software company. But back then, I was still writing video games. And boy, analytics hit my beloved industry hard, basically because of the explosion of the free-to-play online games. And I thought that analytics, tracking and measuring the gamers for everything they do was kind of just going to remove game design. Instead, it was going to create reams and reams of spreadsheets that MBAs would pore over to decide how much you would charge the player to purchase a hat for their pig to wear. But it's turned out to be not so bad. A lot of my friends, although I'm out of the game industry, have stayed in, and they've formed small mobile game shops, and they use analytics to straddle the balance between creativity and commerce. They have to keep the lights on while they're creating delightful environments and worlds for their players to enjoy. And then for myself, as I've gone on to build apps and websites, I found analytics are a way for me to check in occasionally to see how my users are doing with my app. But more importantly, how my app is doing for my users. This might be the most important slide of the deck. I sit in the audience just like y'all, and I wonder, is it online? It's online. It was online last night. Maybe you secretly found it. You know, given that, maybe you can just sit back and relax and enjoy my message, because I'm very excited to share with you all the things I've learned about the interesting problems analytics solves. And you know, I really want to solve questions like, how are customers using my app? How are they using your app? And I say this word analytics like we all know what it is, and maybe we have an idea. I decided to look up on Wikipedia because I was kind of curious, what am I talking about? And here's what Wikipedia says. Analytics is the discovery and communication of meaningful patterns in data, especially valuable in areas rich with recorded information. Analytics relies on the simultaneous applications of statistics, computer programming, and operations research to quantify performance. Analytics often favors data visualization to communicate insights. Okay, cool. So now we get it. In the past, you might have seen analytics quoted classically, page hits and visitor counts. And that was great in the sort of Web 2.0 where everything was delivered. It was just a page, right? It was a form. It didn't exist past just whatever you show the user on their screen. And you know, this is a bit of a web-centric view of the world, and it's okay, don't worry about it, because these aren't useful any longer. A little bit, if you use it as a baseline, if it goes up, that's probably good, and if it goes down, you got to wonder what happened. This number, this is a nice big number, maybe. Is it page hits, visitor counts? It's a fact, but is it actionable? What if I told you that this blog article represented the number of views on my personal blog I got the last year for people wanting to know how I wrote about using Amazon Web Services S3 SDK with Node.js? Maybe it makes me interesting in a dinner party if everybody there was a nerd. But now people call that a vanity metric, right? What am I trying to show off? Maybe it impresses a crowd, maybe it doesn't, but there's a lot missing here. You know, an individual page of content, a blog article, it exists to educate, but it's just a slice of an overall flow. You know, your readers fell into that page somehow. You probably want them kicking around your site for a while, and at some point you're probably going to ask them to do something for you, right? That smells like acquisition, engagement, and revenue. And y'all have been leaning into the web platform pretty hard the last couple of years, right? You're making web pages that are dynamic, they're interactive, they're decorated with UI complications, and they're beamed invisibly to our pocket-sized supercomputers. So some of your stuff isn't even a website anymore. It's not just an article, right? It's a little interactive program. Some of them, they're straight up single-page apps, like Netflix, Gmail, Twitter, my own trip case. And I'm claiming the traditional user metrics based on access, they simply don't help measure the popularity, the use, the success of your single-page web app or any feature on it. And so why do we need a different mental framework to measure how they're used out in the world? Well, they call it a single page web app for a reason, right? That's not a very impressive vanity metric to go quoting. And I'm joking a little bit, right? It's not exactly that, but it's basically that. You know, you hit the page, and it constantly deletes and trims and rebuilds itself based on user interaction. So you need something different. You need a proactive, a deterministic analytics way of measuring success of these things, these single page apps. Or web pages that sit there and exist for a while. They have their own state. And I particularly recommend tracking individual events as users tap something specific on your app's interface. And I reiterate it there because it's important. What does that look like if you're writing JavaScript code? It might look a little bit like this. Right, you have an analytics system. That analytics system has an API called event, and it has some data. A major category of things, of features, nouns, objects on your web app. And then the second one is a binary action, some kind of a verb that happens on those. And these sort of relate to my travel industry. And then an advanced move is to add parameterized context to make the events more richer. So you're sending along extra data. Normally it's simple, like a number or a string, like a flight, an airline carrier, a duration, a count. And I'll tell you, my project trip case that I've been on for about 3 years now, we made no better plan than to make this interface, this analytics.event, simple, reliable. So then we use it all the time. And how do we use it? This build, measure, learn is something that's touted in the industry. I think it came from Eric Ries and the Lean Startup, and it's gone into Jeff Gothelf and the Lean UX books and materials. And the old style monolithic waterfall framework sorts of stuff, where you just build something and you hope they'll come in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, it doesn't work anymore for apps trying to grab traction. Not for startups that don't have a lot of runway. And not even enterprises like my own company, because we're continually judging value for investment. And we're always looking to use this loop, right, this virtuous circle, because we want to retrospect. We want to consider what went right. Because continuous improvement is a part of life, and it's a part of business. So I know you all are builders, and I know you know how to learn, but do you know how to measure? Do you know how to measure the activity on your websites, your single-page apps? And so that's very much what this is about. You can learn plenty of things about how your app is used by analyzing reports of anonymous UX events collected in bulk. And on my company, we're lucky we have usability labs. So when we do a design, if it's a paper prototype or just a simple functional prototype, we'll go through usability with it. We'll find how people think they're going to use it. We take some notes, alter our perspective based on that. We build it, and then we use analytics to see how they really use it, which is often fascinating, and those things often don't connect. So why would you bother doing this? Because it's going to help everyone, right? I talked about the reports, finding those meaningful patterns in data. This is one of those ways to decide, are things really as good as we thought they were? When your biz dev person says, we signed this third-party deal, we think it'll help acquisition. A product manager who says, I want to improve engagement with this feature. And a programmer saying, why am I doing this? Business intelligence is a real job these days. So don't let the blue shirt and the Kanki pant wearing people keep this data away from you, right? Don't allow biz dev to limit your access to flow in the data. Go get it, dig into it, and own it. And own it by making actionable analytics reports. It's going to help everyone who studies it. And analytics might be one of these things that's a test of your company, whether or not you're truly a transparent culture, or if you want to start moving there. And if you want to start bringing data into your conversations. And I mentioned the track events. There's a ton of passive data that just kind of comes along for the ride. What kind of passive data? Well, testers might say, do we need a conference room table full of devices? That'd be nice to have. I don't know, maybe. It sounds crazy. Maybe you just want to find out when a device goes above 5% of use on your site, go get them and test against those. Make sure this stuff is going to work. If a device goes below 5%, kick it to the street. It's not worth your time anymore. Engineers, we're always looking to build the latest and greatest, use all the cool new toys that an OS delivers. Make sure that your users have adopted and upgraded your phones to that new OS. When they have, start leveraging those cool new functions. Designers, what are they going to design to? They could decide as they see the passive data, the size of the handheld clients that hit your site. They can decide what's going to be large, laptop or a tablet, what's going to be small, a phone. And you might be surprised. Maybe your users are coming at you with mega screens, right? And I think you can do better than just centering up your 960 content with 2 inches of dead space on either side. And I put a lot of pressure on our product managers. I think that they're like a mini CEO for features that they're running on their projects. They need to understand and represent the users better than anyone on the team. They need to say no a lot, but when they say yes, it's very significant. So they better be informed by fact and data-based decisions. And then later, find out with confidence that that time and talent invested was worth it. Now, when you look at this and hear my words, you're going to know that Google Analytics very much informed a lot of my experience and decisions. We chose that for a certain reason. Maybe your company wants to host its own data or see Google as a competitor. Don't worry, it's a crowded industry. There's a ton of options out there, highly competitive. And each one of these has a superpower. So make sure that you pick a couple and you spend some time with it for a few days. Write some test code and choose the one that fits your company's needs and fits well in your tech stack. I mentioned passive measurements. What does that mean? So that's all the stuff that your analytics system is just doing for free. It does it while you're asleep if you didn't do a thing, except just initialize it into your app. I'm about to show you a bunch of data. It doesn't come from my company's website. It comes from my personal blog, just because it's realistic and I have access to it, and I don't want to give away any company secrets. Here's an example of some of that device information that comes across with Google Analytics, my analytics system, right? And so I'm giving you this report based on year, first half, second half. So it's fascinating to see where the trends are happening, right? And your QA team is going to love looking at this information because with confidence, they know where they're going to spend their limited budget. More passive data that's recorded. It's interesting to see how the adoption rate goes. iOS users very much grab the latest and greatest. And that's going to, again, influence your engineering decisions on what platform-specific features to support. Stuff like getting rid of the 300 millisecond touch tap delay, or bringing in WebGL, or the new ES 2015, that new JavaScript keywords. Same thing as the other one, Android is the other biggie. You can't deny it, and you want to see how it's growing, because it has its own cool new features you might want to support. And again, designers, they're going to want to find out what is small and medium and large. You don't think about phone or tablet or laptop anymore, because that stuff is also hazy. Phones look like tablets. Tablets want to be small. Laptops want to be bigger. It's all crazy. And you might think, well, it's a solved feature, right? Like we know what all the iPhones look like. But when your website launches, is it going to be hit by next year's car dashboard computers? By the size of your wristwatch? There's new devices showing up all the time. Who knows what the breaking point is for the Wii U's screen tablet? It's 854, by the way. I tried it when I bought one, right after I played Mario Kart. Is this a vanity metric? What country sees my blog? No, it's actionable. Like, what if all of my blogs are just so casual? right? This strikes at content creators. What if I use a lot of slang and idioms? Maybe I need to get rid of that so I don't confuse my readers. Because ultimately I want to deliver value into their life. Maybe I need to start spelling color with a U for all my United Kingdom friends. I don't know. And engineers, if you're looking at this report and all of a sudden you launch and you see an uptick in a certain region, maybe you need to spin up a bunch of edge servers to deliver faster results to those folks in their region of the globe. And of course, this talks very much about the mobileness. And again, this is my own personal blog, so probably most of the readers are looking on a laptop rather than on their phone or whatnot because they're technical articles. But again, you want to better enable your users to use your technology. And then what if you launch a site and there's a sudden uptick in mobile and you didn't build it mobile first? So these are one of those things you could kind of start thinking real quick, how do we address that, right? Always continuously learning. Always looking at the meaningful patterns in the data. Always looking to visualize to report insights. So what about reporting insights? Big data. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's not just a cool buzzword. And analytics really reminds me of it. Sometimes in America, it seems like there's a real combative positioning between art and creativity and like science and numbers. And please get rid of that notion. Everybody on the team should be looking at these sort of reports. And you don't need to know the math that goes behind all the concepts. Just look at the numbers and be comfortable to ride with it. Although, whenever I show Google Analytics dashboards to people, they freak out a bit. And they're like, big data. And I don't blame them. And you might have looked at the slides before and you'd think, like, Ken, how did you pull out these concrete trends? How did you get those slides? They look very specific and concentrated and straightforward. Is this bait and switch? No. Because whatever analytics system you build, make sure that you can build custom reports, right? And this talk was about mobile UX, but it applies to any sort of website and app work. So all of that data your system, your Google Analytics, your analytics system is pulling passively for free. Build a custom dashboard. So here's one I built, right? It's my mobile first view of all of my website traffic. And so you can see a lot of the data that I used in those slides before. And I just pull this up and bam, update my spreadsheets. So make sure to find these trends over time. And because I'm here to deliver value to you, that is the link that allows you to have my dashboard. So when you have your Google Analytics account and you click on this, it'll suck it in. I'll never know. It's totally private. I'll never know what happened. Well, unless you tweet me. Thank you. That'd be nice. But you can apply it to your site that you have live right now. And dashboards are just such an excellent feature, right? They allow you to filter out and to zoom in exactly on the data you want. And you can turn big data into small knowledge, actionable knowledge that you can learn from and do something with. And at some point, someone is going to like these charts that you find, and they're probably going to ask you to report on them routinely because it is great. You're going to see how things change over time, every quarter. And you're going to have to decide what do you support and what do you act on. And so this implies that you have something in production already. What if you haven't gone to market yet, right? What if you're still working on this? And you don't have Google Analytics history to pull from. You don't want to just say, my instinct is, or this is the way we used to do it. And those are important human traits that we need to consider and keep in mind. But how do you do this fact-based, evidence, data-driven culture if you don't have any data? Well, this comes to mind. If you're in a big company, do you have a sister team that you've gotten to know over the time? Maybe you transferred in or some of your people are from there. Maybe you can go to your big enterprise and find someone else who has some of the similar data because their platform or their app or the customers are the same market as yours. Maybe you can look to their data and that'll help you give a launching off place for your work. Services group. Maybe you have a client that you work for who's open-minded, that doesn't mind you taking a look under the hood. Or maybe you have another team inside your services group who has some of this stuff. And then if you're independent, maybe you belong to some local meetups. Or you have a great LinkedIn group that you've fostered over the years, and you can reach out to them. And past that, you know, all else fails, bribery. Bribery is always good. I suggest coffee and chocolate as a start, although I might be profiling myself more than your actual network. Okay, so passive. I talked about passive data. You don't have to do a thing except just to kind of install it, do a few things. Let's talk about active measurements, right? This goes back to that slide I showed you, track event, hotel, flight, that kind of a thing. So this is code you got to write. And this is the heart of my message, is that old style analytics don't work, the new style do, that you track events as people interactive with the widgets and the UI complications on your page. So maybe you have some code that up here, and it's deflected a bit. You'll see the slides later where you could have it in more detail. But you have some service. This analytics facade is the top lines. And that facade basically is just a layer of code in your app that keeps away all of the implementation details, right? Standard kind of engineering that you've done 100 times before. And ultimately, you're going to have an initialization call. So see your docs for how to initialize your library. And then you're going to have an event interface that calls that library once it's been initialized. So you're going to have some major category, you know, an object, a noun, a thing, some action, some verb that happens to it, and maybe this extra data that I talked about, this parameterized data, duration, flight number, airline, whatever, count. So here you can see the bottom code later in the app that's actually exercising that. So the app is initializing itself, and it's going to initialize the analytics system, and it's going to call an event straight away, the app loaded. And then it's going to render itself up. And once it renders itself up, maybe it creates another view later. This looks like Backbone.js. It's a little bit of an older sample app that I worked with. So that view, that Backbone view that renders a page with all sorts of UI complications and widgets, maybe it has a clicker, a click handler, and that click handler gets some data and then calls analytics, right? You selected a program, a TV program, and then that user model, so that is the program in this TV guide app, and it gets the service. So some data for the thing you clicked on the view you made, you're going to handle it, and then you're going to call some analytics on it. And that's the sort of the method you'll use over and over and over again, maybe 100 times, maybe 200 times in your app, depending on how big it gets. And this could be a website, it could be a single-page web app, or it could be a native app. And there's a couple of ways to do native apps. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I mentioned that code. That code's up there. It's called T-strings. It started off showing how to make your JavaScript app speak foreign languages using translated strings. So there's a lot of things going on in that sample app. There's a website you can actually hit later if you want to that will spin it up. The source code's up there. Have a look, clone it, play with it. This is another real-world example I did. I recently, just in September, I had the honor of my first book getting published. So I created a marketing landing page for that book. And I wanted to track every time someone clicked on a link. So they're outbound links or they're internal links. So I decided, how can I use analytics if I love analytics so much? So there's a snippet at the top. This is HTML code that would get stamped all throughout the app, right? And you can see it's an href, right? It's a link. You've used them a million times before. There's an href. That pound means it's inside my app. It could have easily launched off to another external site. But you can see I've used the data attributes that HTML5 allows. And you can already see where I'm going, right? There's a category and an action for each one of those hyperlinks. And down here, there's some JavaScript code, that's executed at the top of the page. And what's it doing? It's using jQuery. Every time you click on an A link, it's going to execute some code. Same code for every link, no matter how many links. It's going to get the data, the category and the action, and it's going to call my analytics facade that wrappers my analytics system. And so this way I can see where people are clicking and where they're going. And what can I do with that? Well, again, you want to visualize that data to communicate insights. That passive tracking analytics dashboard that I showed you, do the same thing with event tracking. And this one is actually from one of the ones we've developed for my trip case app at Sabre. And I've kind of scrubbed out the numbers to protect my career. And you could see that we have these sharing features. And you can share in many different ways. And so this way we could see which one of our sharing features are more often used by our users. Over time, of course. So I mentioned my app, and you might be thinking, what's up with me? And I'm working at a company called Sabre. We're based out of the Dallas area. And we're a tech company serving the global tourism and travel industry. You know, hoteliers and car rental agencies, airlines, corporations. And we particularly built this app, Tripcase. And it's a mobile website, and it's also delivered as an app, native app for Google, Android, and for iOS, Apple app, iOS. It's all the exact same code base. It's all JavaScript, HTML, CSS, carefully curated tech stack. We get the apps out the door by wrapping it up into Cordova. It's been a great architecture for us because our programmers get smart and they stay smart. And we're able to deliver all of this to so many different platforms. And you might wonder, do we use analytics? Definitely. I'll show you a case study. We were able to partner with Uber when they launched their APIs last year. And our biz dev guy said, oh, I got good news. We get to integrate Uber so that wherever you're going to go, you push the button, and wherever you are, it'll automatically hook you up and deep link in their app. And we're like, cool. Except we already had 4 buttons, like in our graphic designer, can we squeeze a 5th in? And he wanted to kill us. So we said, well, what do we do? And arguments ensued. Everybody has an opinion. And someone said, wait a minute, we have analytics. Let's go look at the data. We found out the call button is least used. Let's replace that with the one that we want to introduce. Now, of course, data signals things, but you still have to interpret it, right? You can't just say as a car manufacturer, well, what's the thing that's least used? We'll get rid of that, you know? Oh. Well, the airbag's only ever used once, and not a lot of people use the airbag. Let's get rid of that. Okay, bad idea, right? So you always have to kind of think about it with analytics. It helps guide the discussion. As part of that Uber work, we were very much on a deadline. We wanted to deliver a lot of features and hit their deadline because there was a big marketing publicity for a certain day. So you know how it goes. We had to cut and reconsider. But we put an analytics event on this anyway. And so we're testing our users. What do they want to tap on? It's an indicator of what feature they might want to have that we haven't chosen to build yet. And it turns out lots of people click the pickup button. They don't click the drop off because they kind of get our app that you have a thing you're going to, the airport, you're going to your hotel, you're going to your car, you're going to a meeting. You want to go there. But some people don't necessarily want to be here when they go there. They want to be somewhere else. So that's an interesting feature to pursue. Put analytics around a thing you haven't built yet and see if you want to build it. You know, another thing that data communicates is whether or not something you built is worth your time, worth your user's time. And if you find out that something isn't performing the way you want it to, right, because you built a reporting dashboard and you can see the events tallying up, or a platform or a device, if one of those things aren't performing, invest time into it, either to improve it or to grip and rip. And that's okay too, because there's nothing worse than putting a feature in front of your user that's a speed bump as they journey from one point to the other in your app. So we had a walkthrough that we put in years ago. It's one of these things, it's like you swipe the screens and it has the thing and it tells you this is the app. It wasn't performing because we could see the drop off. Every page we had a continue or a got it. And people were clicking got it pretty quick. They weren't even getting to page 4. So like, why bother maintaining it? Because every time you refresh the app, you got to do more screenshots. Maybe you have iPad edition as well as, you'll have a tablet edition as well as a mobile smaller size edition. So get rid of it. You know, and these analytics, these quantitative fact-based decisions can indicate something wrong is happening. So get rid of it. We could have worked to improve it, which we do in other things. So what's it like to write code against these analytic systems? And when would you want to write more code past just that track event? It seems like you put 100 of these track events in, you figure out how people are using your UI, and you're good to go, except for a couple of reports. Well, let's talk a little bit about the implementation, right? The implementation, you know how I showed you that snippet of code where there's a facade, there's a wrapper, and it said C documentation for init. On Google, for web-based apps, hybrid apps like mine, or web-based single-page apps, or websites like yourself that serves up a page that's overly complex, that has some complexity, you do this. Well, not this, like this. Go look at the docs to actually find what you do. But basically, it's going to inject a piece of script, their SDK. What if you're building a native app? Just straight up iOS, Objective-C, Android, Java, or another thing I'll talk about in a minute. You know, native apps exist, so you can just use your code to execute against them exactly. I said we have a hybrid app, right? That's pretty popular these days, or at least it's not completely esoteric. So hybrid apps are a little more complex because our main business logic is in JavaScript. And then we use Cordova to generate native apps. So there's an Objective-C and a Java layer. Then we bring in the native apps. And then we also bring in a plugin that is a community-based plugin that interfaces our JavaScript to those. So that facade, that wrapper, is all the more important because there's two different paths that can get executed. One is if you're just doing straight up web, so your mobile browser, mobile Safari, mobile Chrome, or your wrapped app, and then you're going to go to the Cordova plugin that goes to the native SDK libraries. So that facade is even more important. It could have been that I just want to make the interface really simple so all of our app coders use it, which we did. It could be that I wanted to abstract it away in case we ever swapped it out because of a business deal or some feature we're looking for, which we haven't yet. But number three, this is great because it's the exact same code and it gets delivered in two different ways, either on the web or on native app. And you just need to have the logic inside of it to let those calls go the right way. Definitely something to think about. And in case one of those other cases, in case one of those previous cases don't actually match up for your needs, there's a basic fallback. There's the analytics measurement protocol is what Google calls it. And if you ever used Google Analytics in the past, JS, you always knew there was something behind the scenes, so they finally exposed it, right? And this is a call that any language that's internet-based can use. In fact, I wrote a game last year in C# and Unity, and I didn't find a library that I liked, so I just executed this straight up. I don't do it inside the main game loop because I need this to be responsive, but before and after, you can measure score and level selected and all these sorts of things. So maybe you have a strange client, like an ATM machine, or a PlayStation game, or maybe it's a compiled binary on another OS that there's not a native library for. So you just call this web interface. So at some point, those dashboards that are in your system, even though you can customize them, you're not going to like that. You're going to feel constrained and you're going to want to do more. So what if you want to science it up? You want to roll your own. And maybe you roll your own because you want to use one of these custom dashboards. You want to make a live dashboard, right? Something that visualizes in 3D. Or maybe you want to get this data and you want to use some third-party off-the-shelf tool, right, for data analysis. And there's fit for purpose no matter where your level of experience and skills are. So Google, and then look for this in your analytics system that you choose. You can query, there's query APIs. And in particular, there's core reporting. And this is a way for you to get your data out of the cloud. And you can use this RESTful API, and every language in the world, I think, supports that. But there's probably a library already interfacing for your language of choice. So check that out. And there's another page down there about dimensions and metrics. And those are like the heart of it, right? You need to know what dimension and what metric you're pulling out, like screen size or tracking events, OS versions. And that can be complicated, but there's a cool link down here where on the left-hand side, you'll see that you could pick your account and your project, and you can start poking at it interactively with the dimensions and the metrics. And over here on the right, you can see that data coming out. So that way, you can sort of prototype what you want your custom program to do. And this is one of those things that can definitely keep some of your teammates busy for a while. And it's a little bit advanced. It's not like you're going to do this day one. But I want to talk about it because I know it's out there, and you're probably going to have this experience. So speaking of experience, here's some pro tips from doing all this the last 3 years and 6 years. At some point, you're going to wonder, especially your QA department, or maybe even your business managers, your QA department when they want to validate the code, programmers as well, and then your business partners, when they want to create the reporting dashboards, they're going to find out, like, they're going to wonder, how do I know what events are out there that you've coded? And you could probably create a wiki or something like that. There's really no awesome way in my mind. But this Chrome extension, when you install it and you click the on button in the toolbar, what it does is it swaps out the JavaScript SDK that loads in with a debug one that prints out all the data in the JavaScript console of your developer tools. So show that to your QA team. It's really not too difficult. They might be looking at it already. So here, you can see, especially in the middle, you can see action and category, right? A test was started. And then there's some contextual parameterized data, a label string. So some test was started with Friday, April 10th, 2014. And this is a great way to, number one, validate your code is working, but number two, later, to find out as you go through a user experience and you see the workflow and all the micro interactions, these are the data dashboards that you're going to want to report on. And as you're doing dev, make sure your developers aren't polluting your production site. This is especially important when you go live with a new feature, because there's nothing worse than pushing it out and then you're like, oh, look, 30 people have already used it. Those weren't real people, those were developers. So even though that's a little bit of a hurtful judgment, the idea here is to filter out your data from dev versus cert versus prod. And there's a couple ways to do that. You could just simply use different accounts. And as part of your production, you have the development account. You push it to cert, and it has maybe a different developer account or the same one. And then later, when you push the prod, you have the production, the very important one. And then you can also process with the analytics system. For example, you could take all the IP addresses from all your offices in Texas and just block those IP addresses, filter them out. At some point, once you've built out your tech stack and you've incorporated analytics in your team culture, you might stretch your curious mind into new positions of thinking. Past engineering and then marketing. So analytics are very much in the marketing realm. You know, ever since 20 years ago when you're filling out those postcards, you know, what's your household income? Would you buy this product again? Would you recommend it to friends? And you send it over. Marketing's been doing this and thinking about it for years. So these are various places that you could go to check it out. And Fitbit's interesting because every once in a while they'll put in an article where they're tracking all their users and they'll kind of say generalities. These are what the people do. So that's fascinating every once in a while. And if you really want to science the crap out of your numbers, look into data science, business intelligence, and machine learning. These are all the sort of the frontiers that will be able to inform your next level of judgment. So I was trying to boil all of my experiences into the 3 things I want you to remember. So, you know, can't you just ask people how to use the app? And yes, you can get out of the office, you can go to a coffee shop, interact with real people, but at some point you're going to have great success and you won't be able to access enough people, right? They're going to be living on the other side of the world. They're going to be awake when you're asleep. So analytics are one of these ways that help you because, you know, you can't reliably ask enough people to learn how they're using your app. And frankly, I'm not even sure people tell you how they actually use their app. I mean, you know, people are distracted all the time, and I think a lot of times they kind of remember with the fuzzy, ideal way that they would use it. Like, oh yeah, I use your app all the time, and I do exactly this with it. Great, thank you, success. But meanwhile, they're distracted and they're doing 100 things, right? Because it's all mobile. So analytics is a great way to step up your conversations. You know, create these custom reporting dashboards based around your product hypothesis. Like, what were you thinking before you started building this stuff? considering the problems your people have in real life and how your software changes them. You know, you're going to understand these pain points, and you're going to relieve them with software. So ship out your solutions and watch how they perform. And when they perform well, and you see that through the analytics reporting, give each other a high five. But when they're not hitting the marks, pull together to improve those features. And this, so I'm hearing voices, but you know, these are, when I look at the numbers, these are your users speaking to you, right? And so I implore you to listen, because hear what they're trying to tell you. Allow your users' experiences to inform your UX design and development. So, if you enjoyed my talk and you want to get some more value out of me, don't forget this is already posted up at the top there on SlideShare. My blog has articles on analytics and programming and leadership, and I'm proud to say my first book came out in September. It's the best thing I ever did, so I just want to mention it. I'll be here tomorrow. Find me in the hallways and hit me up for any question you have. And thanks so much for your time and attention.